All right, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening. This is a 7:30 application of Edward M. Brown. The application is dated November 30, 2015, and the applicant is seeking a variance from the terms of Section 6A1 of the Milton zoning bylaw, seeking to subdivide a parcel of land located at 341, 349 Highland Street. The parcel is 8.53 acres, and the applicant is seeking to subdivide a parcel containing approximately 45,495 square feet of land from the larger parcel with a lineal frontage on Woodside Drive, which is an accepted public way in Milton of approximately 50 lineal feet. The subject property is in a Residence A zoning district. Section 6A1 of our bylaw provides that an independent lot for not more than one detached single-family home be provided with at least 150 feet of lineal frontage on a public way. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight is, to my immediate right, is Board Member Virginia King, and to my immediate left is Board Member Jeffrey Mullen. The rules of the board for this hearing: we'll first hear from the applicant or the applicant's attorney. We'll then hear from any people present who wish to ask questions of Mr. Sheffield or the applicant. Then we'll hear from people who wish to speak in support of the application for variance, and then people who wish to speak in opposition to the variance application. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening. Even though we're being televised on tape, the official record for the hearing is our tape recording. So we'd ask that before anyone speaks, tell us your name and address. Speak up nice and clear and loud so that we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding, particularly if we have to revert to the tape in order to prepare a decision. I've summarized the advertisement. We'll also have as evidence at this particular hearing the application dated November 30, 2015, and for Edward M. Brown, and it's signed by Attorney Robert J. Sheffield of East Milton, Massachusetts, as attorney for the applicant. We have a March 23, 2015 letter from Joseph Prondak, our building commissioner, to Mr. Sheffield, indicating why the variance is necessary. We have a November 30 letter of Mr. Sheffield to the Board of Appeals explaining the circumstances for the variance application. And we have a plot plan of land prepared by Robert E. Hannigan Associates. It's dated September 30, 2015, and it's entitled Plan of Land at 341-349 Highland Street, Milton, Massachusetts. So without further ado, Mr. Sheffield, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. We're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm here tonight on behalf of Dr. Brown, who has a property containing 8.53 acres on Highland Street in Milton. This was purchased by his father, our grandfather, back in 1900, or at least a house was created at that time. This house in the rear of the property was created in 1920, and fortuitously in the 50s, Woodside Drive was created, which backs up to the rear of the property. This is one of the many houses in Milton which were a chauffeur's house or a gardener's house or some kind of an assistance to the main house. And it served that way for many years. The present occupants of the house, who are also here tonight, wished to buy the house. And they have lived in the house for more than 15 years. They would like to purchase the house, but under the zoning bylaws of the town of Milton, they cannot because it doesn't have 150-foot frontage on the cul-de-sac, which is the end of Woodside Drive. The neighbors are here tonight. I first heard from an attorney at 4:30 this afternoon saying that they are supportive of the application. However, they don't want them to put a driveway improvement in. And the plan was that as long as Dr. Brown, who has lived there his entire life, is residing at the property, the access would continue to be through the current length of driveway from Highland Street. Dr. Brown wants that. The purchasers want to continue the use from Highland Street. And additionally, the neighbors would like to not have a driveway off of Woodside Drive. The only difference of opinion is we would prefer that that restriction lasts only so long as the property continues to be owned by Dr. Brown. He has no immediate plans of leaving. However, 10 years from now, who knows, and we wouldn't want to restrict the entire parcel by the access through the property from Highland Street. I would imagine that sometime additional houses would be pursued there because that's the way Milton is going, and the old estates of 8 to 10 acres are becoming less and less commonplace. The frontage now is 50 feet, and particularly if a driveway is not planned to be located there, it would appear that that 50 feet would be, adequate for the frontage and for the uses, but would not be, and it could be grounds for a variance. The inability for the people that have lived there for 15-plus years is a hardship in that they cannot buy the property. And that hardship is upon them, and it's also upon the owner of the property, Dr. Brown, who's here tonight. I would ask the board to consider this for a variance. And I believe that we have two things. Number one is we have the frontage, which typically does not exist in the large estates which have a chauffeur's house or a gardener's house or something along that line. This is kind of a unique situation where 30 years after the house was constructed, somebody built a roadway right up to provide frontage for the house.
Have you finished your presentation?
I've finished the main presentation. I would entertain any questions.
Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Sheffield?
So the access is currently from Highland down this right-of-way
Yes, it
for
is.
both properties?
Pardon me?
For both properties.
Yes, it is.
And the fee in the area that's marked right-of-way is owned by Brown?
Yep.
Who owns the fee in the right-of-way from Highland?
Brown.
And who uses that driveway now?
Both Brown and both 341 and 349.
Only those two people?
Those are marked.
So it's really a driveway?
What?
Just a driveway?
Yes, it's just a driveway.
And what is Woodside Drive? Is that used at all?
Not by this property, but Woodside Drive is here, and there are houses that front on Marshall Street. And there are also a number of other houses here on
Right.
Woodside Drive. And that goes down to the back of one of the Wallaston Golf Course holes.
Right, right. Well, I'm not sure I have any idea what's the objection to using Woodside Drive, frankly.
I only
Seems-
heard of it at 4:30 this afternoon,
Okay.
and,
So maybe we can talk about that during the later.
yes.
But the frontage for the main lot is the driveway.
The frontage for the main lot is
Is the right of way.
all this area on Hillside.
So if the main lot is further subdivided, it's going to have frontage issues as well.
No, because it could be subdivided by a roadway coming in.
Well, that's assuming there's a new roadway.
That's assuming that there'd be a roadway coming in. I mean, just like Fletcher Steel Way
I get it.
is,
I get it. It's not that, but you're assuming facts that aren't there. And what my point is I don't want to further exacerbate an access. I want to just understand what the question is. And the question is that you want to somehow tie the access for the new lot to the life of the current owner of the large lot. That's the ask, right?
in other words, we'd agree not to access through Woodside Drive, at least to the term of the life or the ownership of the property by the current owner. If that would be, meet the objections of the neighbors that don't want one more driveway on the street.
Yeah. That sounds complicated to me from a legal perspective, from a bank and financing and marketability. It sounds complex, but I'm happy to hear more on it. I just wanted to understand the facts.
By all
Okay.
means.
That's all for now, John.
Mrs. King?
I looked at the site, and I wasn't exactly sure if a driveway were to be put in there from Woodside Drive. Has anyone looked at it saying that it would be able to put a drive in from there?
You would be able to put a driveway in there, and it has the 50 feet of frontage, but also there's a slight incline. And right now, they are using the Woodside for our water connection to put town sewer in this location.
So my understanding is that this right here is currently owned by Dr. Brown.
That is correct.
And I assume that that is going to go to the current renters at
Yes.
349.
That's correct.
So that they would have plenty of, not a kind of driveway that you'd have to be turning around in, strange angles or anything, or inconveniencing neighbors, other than the fact that there would be another driveway there that maybe they were happy not to have before.
That's correct.
Okay. That's it.
Who maintains Woodside Drive for passage purposes?
The Woodside Drive is maintained by the town of Milton. It's an accepted road.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke, Mr. Sheffield. I mean the right-of-way. Does Dr. Brown or
Dr. Brown.
one of his representatives?
Dr. Brown does.
Okay. And is there some type of an access agreement with the other owner that abuts the right-of-way to use it? Or is that just
No.
by informal permission, or?
Well, it's by permission, but this property right now is owned by Dr. Brown, and it's rented to the people that live there.
Right, the subject property. But is there another property that's along the right-of-way that uses the
No,
right-of-way
there is
for
no
access?
other property.
And I
This
misunderstood you.
services only 341 and 349 Highland Street.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Let me, if you have nothing further to add, let's see if there's anybody present who has questions of Mr. Sheffield or who otherwise wants to speak in favor of this application for variance. All right, the record indicates that there's no such person present. Is there anyone present this evening who either has questions regarding the application or wishes to speak in opposition to this variance application. Yes, sir. Why don't you come on up here and take a seat? Even though we're not on the TVs, it's being tape recorded, it'll be,
At your pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to your members and to the applicant. We begrudge them nothing for coming forward with an application. Actually, my client, Benjamin Simeone, Richard and Judy O'Connor of 1 and 5 Woodside Drive, we're all on one level in the real estate development business ourselves. So, I mean, trying to do something with land is
do me
nothing.
one favor, please.
Sure.
Could you identify yourself?
I
Tell us
thought-
your
I
name
thought
and
I did.
address, and-
I thought I did.
Maybe you did, I didn't hear.
My
it.
name is TJ Recupero. I'm an attorney from Stoughton, Massachusetts. I have an office in Milton also,
From Stoughton, where's your office in Milton?
on Randolph Avenue,
Great.
1131 Milton.
Good, I think this is the first time we've had the pleasure of seeing
It
you,
is.
so
It is.
welcome to the Board of Appeals.
It's my pleasure, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, again.
The floor is yours.
So again, I represent the owners of 1 and 5 Woodside Drive. And again, we don't begrudge anyone trying to do something with their real estate. It's what we do. At this point, though, I think what I didn't hear from the applicant was any justification under the traditional criteria for a variance. Number one being lot shape, soils, or topography that create a hardship in some unique way. And I heard nothing to that end that meets that first prong of a variance. Also, I think this fails the second basic premise of variance law, which is you can't create your own hardship, and that's exactly what's happening here, is that in order to request a variance from this board, they're also creating the own hardship that they're asking for relief from. Now, I have to take issue with the phone conversation I had with my brother earlier today, and again in the hallways. I think it was stated that we support the variance. We don't. What I said is that we don't have any problem with the division of land, the creation of a lot on that land, to the extent that it doesn't affect any of the owners on Woodside Drive, particularly the ones that I represent, and being at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac that has a 50-foot right-of-way, but I believe that's only paved to 20 feet. I took a Google Street View picture of it, but also marched it off. It looks like it's a 50-foot paved way, and this is an aerial view, if that helps the board just situate,
Great, thank you very much.
showing the two lots that I'm here representing. There is at the end of Woodside Drive a small cul-de-sac, but it's not a 100-foot bulb at the end of a 50-foot right-of-way. It's a small paved way. It's actually densely vegetated at the end of the roadway. There's a stone wall, historic stone wall, that runs the border of the doctor's property all along the 1 Woodside Drive property that marks the boundary that will actually have to be demolished and cut into for the purposes of both the driveway and, in fact, a sewer and water connection if it was to access sewer and water, although those, I would imagine, could be recreated for those purposes. But if you're talking about coming to this board for a variance, there is a way to get another lot off the end of Woodside Drive, Highland or otherwise, and that's through the subdivision process, and then no variance would be required. And in fact, it has to go through the subdivision process anyway, because you can't bring this for an A&R. It lacks sufficient frontage, and there's no waiver process in the A&R process. Has to go through the subdivision process anyway. And to that extent, asking for a variance for frontage off of Woodside Drive and then going through a subdivision process, I think, is tipping the process on its head.
Do you think the application for variance is premature at the
I
present
think it
time?
fails in that regard, yes. Now, we could sit on our hands and be very quiet if all of our concerns are met. If I can put that quietly, we don't have a problem with carving off a lot. It's the process and the impact on the neighbors that we have a problem with, so. I'd be happy to take any questions, but that's the basis of the objection.
Thank you for coming. Why don't you stay right there? Mr. Mullen is a man of many questions.
I don't have any questions on this.
Mr. Mullen has no questions. Mrs. King?
No, I don't right now.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate your appearance. Is there anybody else present who'd like to speak regarding this application, whether for or against the application for variance. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Corey.
Okay, you're going to have to come up here.
Oh,
Or
gosh. Actually, my name is Jeannie Corey. This is my husband, John Corey. And, gee, we've lived there 36 years. I've never met Dr. Brown. But anyhow,
where do you live?
we live on the corner of Marshall Road and Woodside Drive. And actually, the guest house is
live in that
right
house.
directly behind us.
Right.
Okay.
So our 15-year neighbors, we've actually never met them. But we're concerned also about, I mean, it's, you know, we've lived there 36 years. It's very, very quiet. Woodside Drive is sort of like cul-de-sac, dead end at both ends. And we're just a little bit nervous about, we don't know if other homes are going to go up there or if it's just basically going to be a driveway for the guest house behind us. But anyhow, those are questions that concern us.
I don't understand why they don't come off of Highland Street with a complete plan as to how they want to develop the property down the road rather than piecemealing it at this point, because it doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, usually you have a plan and you go through with the plan, and what if they want all the access to come off of Woodside Drive and plan it accordingly down the road that way? That wouldn't be good for Simeone's, it wouldn't be good for Corey's, it wouldn't be good for anybody. So, you know, it makes sense that they should approach this with a overall plan. I mean, Dr. Brown isn't getting any younger. He isn't gonna last forever. So somewhere along the line, they should come up with a plan. So we all know what's going on versus piecemealing it. Do you agree with that, Jeannie?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
You don't have to answer that question. That's all right.
Well, I'm concerned about it, to say the least.
Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No.
No. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of the Coreys, Mrs. King? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, and,
I'd like to address some of their
of course you can,
concerns.
Mr. Sheffield. Fire away.
First and foremost, nothing at this time at all is being planned for the subdivision of the 8.5 acres. That is not current, it's not being considered at this time or anything else. What happens 10 years from now, I have no idea, and I'm not going to prognosticate it. Basically, by doing this subdivision here, we are eliminating access to the major property, and the access is going to be owned by the people that are buying this house. So that would preclude using Woodside Drive for future subdivision. So one of your concerns is Woodside Drive could be the access way for the subdivision of the 8.5 acres. This takes that off the table. Okay. Not being able to sell this property leaves that on the table. And I'm not saying that it would be used, but there would be nothing to preclude it. So that part of your concern would be better addressed by selling this property to somebody unrelated to Dr. Brown, and they couldn't use that person's property for accessing the 8.5 acres.
So basically, it's just for the guest, it would just be an access for that guest home.
Just the access for the guest home here.
Would they use this street or would they use Woodside Drive?
For access to
Yeah.
the guest.
This is
What they would
What
do
is this,
is
private meeting?
actually use Highland Street for as long as the Browns lived there. In other words, this would be the frontage, but someday there would be a driveway there. But there wouldn't be a driveway there this week, next month, probably next year, maybe 5 years from now. But one of the things that the people that are buying this house are very interested in is in continuing having the right to use the driveway that they've been using for the last 15 years. and I'm very happy with it. So it probably would not result in any change to your situation now or in the foreseeable future. One thing we know is 20 years from now, things are going to be different than they are now. We can deal with that. Okay? The other thing is that we cannot get an ANR without the grant of a variance. If we get the grant of a variance, the planning board can approve an ANR, but without the variance, they cannot approve an ANR because it fails to meet the criteria of having the proper square footage and frontage. And that's why we are before the Board of Appeals, before we go to the planning board. And this is the way it has always been done in this town. So we're not putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, well, I don't think Mr. Attorney Recupero agrees with you, but just we'll give you a chance to come back.
Yep.
Why don't you very briefly address the issue of whether this is whether there is any statutory evidence that would warrant this board or allow the board or permit the board to grant the variance, and particularly Mr. Attorney Recupero's prime argument that this is really a self-created hardship.
There would be a logic in the self-created argument if this house were built in the last 5 years and now we were seeking to create a substandard lot. This is the house that was created in 1920. Woodside Drive was not created by Dr. Brown, his predecessors, owners of the land related to Dr. Brown's property. He did not.
Do you know when Woodside was, is it an
Yes, in the
accepted?
1950s.
Okay.
In the 1950s, so it's about 65 years old as far as the subdivision is concerned. And so Dr. Brown did not create this problem. This is a problem that existed for nearly 100 years. The house was built in 1920, and a partial solution was created by an adjacent landowner in the 50s by the subdivision that includes Marshall Road and Woodside Drive. So I think that the suggestion that Dr. Brown created his own hardship, it just fails to meet the test. The other point is this is a house that was built 85 years ago. No, 95 years ago. That has substantive frontage, and at the time it was built, frontage was not a requirement for a house. And the current zoning went into effect in 1939.
You may have said this, Mr. Sheffield, but forgetting your subdivision, what is, along the right-of-way, what's the frontage of the Brown parcel? Do you know how many feet that is? How many lineal feet?
It's about 1,000 feet.
The other thing I think I'd like to hear from you on the issue is this. I understand that you received a call at 4:30 this
Yes.
afternoon. I assume that was from Attorney Recupero.
Yes.
And I guess my question is,
All right, received an email from
Oh,
him,
whatever,
and
that's- sure.
I called him immediately.
okay, does it make any sense to you, Mr. Sheffield, that perhaps you may want to consider, or Dr. Brown may want to consider, a short continuance in this hearing to give you an opportunity to meet with Mr. Recupero and his clients, as well as the Coreys, in order to discuss these issues further?
I think it might be helpful. We have not had the time to discuss them, to come to a solution.
That's what I
at this
mean,
point.
yeah, you probably did. So let me talk to my fellow board members. Does that make a lot of sense to you, Mr. Mullen? That we give the parties the opportunity to try to discuss these issues in their private forum and see if they can come to some type of an agreement?
Sure, I think that's fine, but I think this application has some significant challenges. Putting aside the issue of the variance standard in Chapter 40A, I think the idea of relying on a public way for frontage and then deliberately not using it, or specifically and affirmatively not using it, is a really poor precedent for the town. I can't imagine us approving that, particularly given the fact that we then would limit the access to only the life of the grantor. It seems to me unfinanceable, unworkable, and only inviting a further problem down the road in the event of a sale of the main property, when we'll be back here having exacerbated the access issues from Highland. I don't think this is a workable solution for us. I'm happy to hear other solutions, but just from a practical access point of view, if this was presented as a fairly straightforward, I'm going to use Woodside, that's not what we have, and I think it's got some significant issues that I don't immediately see overcomable. But I'm happy to, support an extension if those issues can be addressed. I just think it makes sense to just give that point of view, at least right now.
Okay, Mrs. King.
That makes sense to me as well. I don't really know what I'm approving here right now. I'd like to know a little bit more about it.
Okay. Let me ask Mrs. Fitzgerald, do we have other dates reserved? Okay, thank you.
Due February 4th
February 4th.
is the next hearing date, but I can look at the,
How many hearings do we have on the 4th?
3.
I can't do the 4th.
That's right.
Want me to get the book and
Pardon me?
That's right.
Well, yes, and for different reasons as well. So we'll take a place. Mr. Recupero, how's your schedule? Do you have?
Checking right now.
Okay, great. Let's see what we have available from Mrs. Fitzgerald.
I'm going to be away from the 10th to the 23rd of February.
Well, it's the 12th now. How are you at the end of this month? You?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Am I on the 4th? No. Good, okay.
Steve's doing it now. When are you thinking, a week away, or?
I have flexibility. Today's the 12th. After the 19th, I have plenty of time before we get into to February. How are you, Jeffrey?
What day? I'm sorry, John?
Any day in the, let's say the last week of, any day after the 19th. That looks good.
21st, I have this room open.
Do you have it for hearings?
No, I meant like it's available.
Okay.
Okay.
Tuesday, the 26th is available on the Blue to the Baker.
Ginny, how are you on the 21st or 26th?
I can do either.
Me too.
I can do either. How are you, Bob, 21st or 26th?
Yes.
Mr. Recupero?
At your pleasure. 21st is better for me.
Okay.
I do with either.
Then let's go with the 21st. What day of the week is it?
Thursday.
Okay.
We'll do it right here.
7:30? Here. Hopefully that'll be our only matter on, and if somehow some type of agreement is reached, try to provide us with a memorandum of that
I'd be pleased to,
2 or 3 days before the hearing so we can read it and consider it.
definitely.
Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, this hearing of Dr. Brown is being continued until Thursday, January 21st at 7:30, right here in this conference room. We look forward to seeing you at that time. Thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we walked down Woodside. Okay. Yeah, that's funny. You know, I don't remember the last time they counted down the driveway, our driveway, in terms of the amount of power that was generated. So it's probably
Yeah, you're the 8 o'clock, so you'll be
the people who live down there.
Yep.
I was gonna meet.
We're the guests.
Oh, yeah, that's we do the people.
I had to say that, okay? It's just,
Oh, I know, but I didn't want to.
you don't want the neighbors to feel like they gotta do it. Okay? Even by our.
Oh, at least you're.
We do, we do.
There's some bamboo on our side of the wall.
Oh, we don't, I didn't know that.
Why don't you call it? Next hearing.
Well, we put those trees up too in the back.
That's my stuff
I
here.
have pictures in here that.
We'll take them up. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to meet the neighbors after 36 years.
I'm not gonna move in, I sure. The pool is right there, I go. The pool's
It's
gone.
not there
And I said, well, I
anymore.
wonder if they're teenagers, it was for all these years, never.
You're like, I've been here before.
Our 27-year-old son almost drowned
Oh,
when he
God.
was a year old.
Oh,
So then we got, so it's never been open, and then we finally said, let's just pull it
We
out.
removed the whole
So, yeah.
foundation and everything. Oh, yeah. It was for weeks, it was like, wow.
These guys have business.
Yeah, no, all right, we're gonna go. Thank you, everyone. Thank
Okay,
you
thanks
very
for coming,
much.
guys.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
Who's Dr. Brown?
Oh, he's probably
guy?
in bed by now. I assume. Mr. Sullivan, are you all set? Okay. We're going to call to order our second hearing of the evening, and this is the 7:45 hearing at date 11. And this is on the application of Charles Cassano and Sullivan Homes LLC. The application's dated December 2nd, 2015, and the applicant is seeking a special permit pursuant to Section 6A1A of the zoning bylaw, and for a variance so as to allow a proposed Lot 2, as shown on a plan, to have a frontage of approximately 446 feet along a 20-foot right-of-way by the name of Perkins Lane, and only approximately 28.63 square feet of frontage on Blue Hill Avenue. The subject property is
Hey, Bob.
located at 591 Blue Hill Avenue and is located in a residential A district. The applicant has filed a plan by Robert Hannigan showing the proposed two lots. And Perkins Lane, I guess by stipulation here, is not an accepted public way, and the planning board hasn't made any technical findings so as to allow it to be declared a public street under the Milton zoning bylaw. The applicant is contending that the special permit and the variance should be granted because the subject property has soil and topographic conditions on economic hardship issues, and because of the public benefit the applicant contends if this project were to go forward. My name is John Leonard. I should also mention that this matter was before the board on slightly different terms. And a public hearing was, the application for the other variance and special permit was dated July 2nd, 2013, and a decision was rendered on that application, which was similar to this application, on December 11th, 2013, granting the requested relief, but with conditions. So that having been said, we have summarized the, I just should tell you who we are. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. To my immediate left is board member Jeffrey Mullen, and to my immediate right is board member Virginia Donahue King. The rules for this hearing are going to be just like the last one. We'll hear from the applicant, hear from questions that people may have, hear from people who support the application and people who wish to oppose the application. We're tape recording the proceedings, so speak up nice and clear and loud so that we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding. We have as evidence, we have the application. My copy here is undated, but it looks like it's somewhere around November 29th, 2015. We have a denial letter by Mr. Prondak, our building commissioner. It's dated October 28th, 2015. We have a letter from Paul J. Sullivan, one of the applicants, to the board, dated November 29th, 2015, specifying in great detail the history of the property and why he believes the relief should be granted. We have a couple of plans showing the subject property. We have a reference plan. It looks like it's from the website, showing the area of the property and showing Perkins Lane. And we have a letter from Edward and Lisa Adams, dated October 14, 2015. The letter is fairly detailed. I will not read the letter in its entirety, but the essence of the letter is that they have agreed, they are the owners of the Perkins Lane, the private way, and they have agreed to provide frontage for Lot 2 on this particular application along Perkins Lane in order to make this two-lot plan possible. They believe that the new shared driveway will provide increased emergency access for the fire department, as well as for emergency vehicles for the homes along the 20-foot right-of-way. They expressed their concerns about possible alternative development proposals or uses of the subject property that they believe would be detrimental to this long-standing neighborhood. So therefore, they support the application. We also did receive one other memo from Brian and Debbie Haggerty at 600 Brush Hill Road. Did you receive a copy of this, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, I did.
Okay, terrific. The memo is dated January 8th, 2016, and it suggests that they are the direct abutters to the subject property. They note that there have been many attempts to develop the property over the years, with Mr. Sullivan being one of the more frequent people interested in developing the property. That they, in principle, support the two houses being built on the lots, but they do have certain concerns and conditions that they want addressed, including determining a safe zone for trees that run along the boundary, presumably of their property. They would like to see some buffer options that could be a fence and could be placement of arborvitaes. They suggest that if the utilities for the proposed development are underground, they would like to have their utilities buried underground as well, and that there's some drain that's further up on Perkins Lane that was installed when Mr. Sullivan developed another property up there at 610 Brush Hill Road which the Haggertys suggest does not really work properly, and they would like to see that made larger so that it would work as designed. They also believe that they and presumably other abutters would like to see some conceptual plans for the development so they could see how the houses are going to be sited on the lot, how they're going to be oriented on the lot, what size the proposed dwellings would be, and what style. They also ask for expected sales prices, but we normally don't get involved in that part of the application because it tends to be beyond our expertise. So now we'll have all of those documents as evidence at the hearing. Mr. Sullivan, it's good to see you again. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals, and we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Sullivan, Smith Road, Milton. As you discussed tonight before you regarding 591 Blue Hill Avenue, the nursery that's been there for almost 100 years, I guess. And I just wanted to start off, I guess, and explain what happened on the upper part of Perkins Lane. There's two sections of Perkins Lane. One is the lower portion of it is owned by the Haggertys, and the upper portion of it is owned by the Adams. I purchased, I think it was 2005, I purchased a home at 614 and on Brush Hill Road, and I think I actually came to the Board of Appeals first, and then I went to the planning board, and the final solution to, I wanted to subdivide the land. There was approximately 2.5 acres of land there. So I went before the planning board, and I proposed a 2-lot subdivision using Perkins Lane. So Perkins Lane has been approved. It is the frontage for the rear house at 610 Brush Hill Road. The Adams home has no frontage on Brush Hill Road. It's basically all on Perkins Lane. So the planning board in 2005 accepted that portion of Perkins Lane anyways. So I went to, so the issue is the rear lot, really, when it comes down to Lot 2. Lot 1 is, let me just go back to the 2013 permit that was issued, the variance. So in 2013, the Board of Appeals approved 232,000 square foot lots with some conditions. The conditions were frontage for the rear lot and conservation hearing if necessary. And I believe there might have been one other issue, but so we've gone back and forth. I've met with the planning board informally recently in the fall of 2015 and had several discussions with them regarding the property.
And that's regarding this particular application?
Yes, this layout, 2-lot. Originally, I think I filed a 3-lot with the Board of Appeals.
You did.
We had a series of meetings with the neighborhood, and I agreed to reduce it to 2. Everybody seemed fine with 2 lots up there, to the best of my knowledge. So the real issue comes down to this Lot 2. It's the best way to handle the frontage. So our current plan is, the Adamses were fine with allowing us to claim frontage on Perkins Lane. The issue is, typically what the planning board would be, is the right-of-way sufficient for access to the lot? Well, the 20-foot right-of-way is, first, I submitted a plan. It's dated 1929, May 7th. That's when the lot was created, and Perkins Lane was there. Perkins Lane's been there since 1900, I believe, or even pre-1900. So it existed pre-zoning. So my thought is that the Adamses were fine with us claiming frontage. So the issue comes down to, where you have your frontage, you're supposed to have access. At the last planning board meeting, Alex Whiteside suggested that if I come back to the Board of Appeals for the subdivision of the two lots, 32,000 square foot lots, that I consider seeking a variance from that requirement of where you have your frontage, you create deeded access to it. I think that's, Mr. Prondak might have said the same in his letter, but, so that's what we're proposing here, is that there's 150 feet of frontage on Perkins Lane, just on the Adams property. And we have actually have an agreement with the McLeods are willing to, we were short 11 feet, so I met with Norm McLeod and suggested a little swap of land on the corner so we could pick up to 11 feet rather than bringing the Haggerty's property into the frontage. So we've created all the 150 feet right here along the Adams portion of Perkins Lane. So then the driveway would come out here. It has, Lot 2 has a little bit of frontage on Blue Hill Avenue. Lot 1 has 150 feet. There's about 161 feet there, so it's 11 feet more or less that Lot 2 has on Blue Hill Avenue. But it has, its driveway goes all the way out to Blue Hill Avenue. At the planning board meeting, there's two curb cuts currently here. There's like a semicircle driveway in front of this existing building, the greenhouse. And one of the members asked that if we do develop the property, they'd consider closing one of the openings out to 138 off. So we're proposing that both homes would come out more or less right about here. And there's pretty good sight lines down 138 in both directions. At that point, it's one of the higher points on 138. So that's the layout we have proposed. We're just going to put two single-family homes here that would, I haven't selected specific homes yet at this time, but, you know, they're going to be 3,000 square feet maybe. You know, the back one might be a little bit larger than the front one. Might be 3,500 square feet.
You mean for the back, the rear? Yeah.
Yes.
And do you normally construct traditional dwellings that are consistent, reasonably consistent with neighborhood dwellings, or do you put up Chinese pagodas or some exotic type of house?
I've built a few homes in Milton, but almost all of them are pretty traditional colonial-style homes, 2.5-story homes. Similar to what the Adamses is. You know, the Adams is probably a little bit larger home than I'd build on either one of these lots, but.
What type of residence did you construct at 614 Brush Hill Avenue?
614 was an older home. I think it was dated in the 1860s, and after discussions with the planning board, they really wanted me to preserve the home, and I agreed to do that. I sold it to somebody I knew who put a fairly large addition on it, and pretty much kept the style of the existing home there, inside and out, with low ceilings, and, you know, he renovated the existing older home and then put the new addition on.
Just so that I understand what you said, was it your testimony that Lot 2 would access, thank you, Blue Hill Avenue along this driveway that you've created?
Yes, this
And
strip,
wouldn't be using Perkins Lane
that's correct.
for access?
That's correct.
And what's the reason for that?
There's two reasons. One, the back portion of the Adams property, there's wetlands there, and it's pretty much right on the other side of the lane. And so reconstructing that lane, well, there's two issues. One, there's already somewhat of a drainage issue there that was pre-existed any of the development, because most of Brush Hill Road area, that hill is, I live up that way, by the way, is glacial till. The soil doesn't absorb much water, so there's a lot of sheet flow. The water, when it rains hard, the water just runs down the slopes of the various things. So a lot of the water that comes down into the Haggerty property, or a good portion of it that gets by the drainage, that sometimes comes down into the gravelled area and then down into the driveway of the Haggertys, is sheet flow through the, a little bit from the Adams property, but mostly from the 614 house. You can go when there's a storm, and you can see the water come from Brush Hill Road. Part of it's, the water comes off of Brush Hill Road. There's not much of an asphalt curbing there, so the water can come off the road. It comes onto 614, and it sheet flows right through that property and ends up onto Perkins Lane. And so there was no way for me to stop that. The water that actually comes down Perkins Lane is not that significant. I think that drainage system can handle that, no problem. And then the other issue was at the top of Perkins Lane, and I discussed this with Mr. Haggerty really last year, was that the Brush Hill Road, the water on Brush Hill Road was coming down off of Brush Hill Road and going down Perkins Lane. So I just repaved the top of that and created a spill berm to keep the water on Brush Hill Road so that that water would no longer go down the lane. So we'll see if that helps improve it somewhat.
And do I understand that the Adams are going to give you, for Lot 2, some type of an emergency right of access going north?
Yes, for
Is that
emergency
true?
vehicles, or, if the residents had to get out of there, they're fine with that access, yeah. They have no problem with recording something on that.
Okay. What about the several concerns that Mr. Haggerty mentioned in his memorandum? Regarding some type of buffer zone or?
Sure. There's a couple things going on. There's a pretty good mound between his driveway. His driveway's, it's not right on the edge of the property. It's a few feet off the property line. And there's a pretty good mound between the properties. It's probably a berm about 4 feet high. And there's a lot of plantings, older trees that have been there for years. We don't intend to touch any of those trees. They create a pretty good screen up almost to the property line. It opens up a little bit up here near the Adams property. All those trees will remain in place. I don't have a problem with bringing an arborist in to make suggestions how to protect those trees so we don't damage the root systems. It's part of the reason I've kept this just a driveway too, is to limit the damage, rather than build a fully constructed road. There's 2 beech trees here too that, are very beautiful, tall trees, and we intend to protect those so they survive the construction as well. There's sewer and water in the street right in front of the property. The sewer's right here. There's the sewer manhole right here. The water goes across. We could tie it at any point. So if there's an issue, the driveway itself is not dug down that deep. It's not going to create a problem for the trees. It's really the utilities that you have to dig down below frost level that could potentially create a problem. You have to be careful digging them.
Are the utilities going to be underground?
The sewer and water will be, and then the electric will likely be underground to both homes, yes. So
And
what we could do is, if the arborists decide there's an issue digging the sewer and the water over here, we could dig it on the backside and come in from the backside for the homes. There's also a sewer manhole up here, and I don't know if the house was right here, whether we could get proper pitch into that manhole. There's a sewer easement that runs through here, and there's a manhole. I don't know if it's on Lot 2, or if it's on the McLeod property or not, but we haven't located it yet. The town was up there looking for that last year. But, as far as, I don't have a problem putting a fence up or doing some additional plantings, but there's a pretty substantial amount of trees along here already. We couldn't plant arborvitaes, in the description that's here. There's not enough room, really. We could put a fence on our side, which would be easier, probably, and I don't have a problem, working with Mr. Haggerty and creating a buffer that, protects his privacy. when I did the development up top at 610 and 614, I worked with Mr. Hagan and his wife then to make sure that we created something that wouldn't create any issues for him. So on the other items on this list, the underground is, the only thing about the underground electric, I assume he's speaking about, but I don't know, maybe he's talking about sewer and water. If we dig on our side to bring the underground to, back to this house, Lot 2 house, and even up to the Lot 1 house would be in this area, we're gonna be on the other side of that berm. If we cut across that berm, we're gonna, damage trees, and so, but that's something we could discuss, if there's a place we could cut through, we could trench up to a certain point, and then maybe he could cut through and then bring it through on his property to have underground service if he wanted it.
Okay. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Sullivan?
This must be our access night.
This is our access.
What's the difference with this with the 2013 variance? I know the lots are different, but is the basic plan
I didn't
the
have an
same?
agreement with the Adams to create frontage on there on Perkins Lane.
What do you propose to do with the 2013 variance? Ignore it, supplement it, amend it? Is it just going away?
Well, it's lapsed.
It's 2 years, that's
It's
what's
lapsed.
Lapsed.
I would have used it if
It's
it
null
hadn't
and void.
lapsed. Yeah.
Does any, I'm not, I don't, this is a, you probably show my bias. I feel like this is, we're again, going through contortions to create false frontage here. Does anyone use Perkins Lane to access Blue Hill Avenue?
Mr. Hagerty uses it to go to Brush Hill Road. And then.
Nobody goes to Blue Hill Avenue.
Delivery vehicles go down from Brush Hill Road down to Mr. Hagerty's house, making deliveries to his house. Like Federal Express.
Can't get there from Blue Hill Avenue
Can't get where?
to Lot 2, using Perkins Lane.
Oh, physically, you could go through there, yeah, but, Mr. Hagerty didn't want us to use his lane. So that's why I didn't claim any frontage on it.
What was the 2013 plan? What were you assuming there? Were you assuming you were going to use Perkins Lane?
I don't remember what, I might have had discussions with the Adams and thought there was a possibility of getting access.
Is the planning board saying they're going to make the finding to make Perkins Lane an actual road for the purpose of the bylaw? Is that what's going on
I
here?
don't think that's the case.
Then I don't see how you can provide the frontage. It's not an accepted public way.
It is, Perkins Lane is with, 610 uses Perkins Lane, it's their frontage. I know the planning board's confused about that. but
So was the
it's
building
clear-
inspector then, because
Well,
that's what his
it's
letter to
clearly
you
their-
says.
It's clearly their frontage. I built the home, I subdivided the
Oh,
property.
I hear that, Paul, but I mean, we get this letter from the building inspector specifically stating that,
Mr. Mullendall, I didn't come to you and ask you for a variance. It doesn't have 150 feet of frontage. There's a home on that property, right?
there's a what?
There's a home on that lot. Where's the frontage? It's on Perkins Lane,
Which one?
right here, the Adams property.
Oh, no, I know, but we're talking about the other lot.
614 you're talking about. Mr. Sullivan's talking about the
610's,
six,
that is an accepted way. Perkins Lane, the upper part where 610 is an accepted way. Absolutely is. I subdivided that property, a formal subdivision process.
Yeah.
There's no frontage at the top. I gave you both plans, so you can see.
I'm looking at it.
You can see the plan with the upper part of Perkins Lane. That's the only frontage is on Perkins Lane. No, this one right here. The only frontage is on Perkins Lane. 610's frontage is on Perkins Lane. It has to be an accepted plan. There's no frontage. This is not the same as the previous applicant. It was using the top of the road. The difference would be, here's the other port. This house, 610's right here. Its only frontage is here. The frontage is on Brush Hill Road. I would have had to get a variance from the Board of Appeals if I was going in that direction. I didn't. It was approved by the planning board. They accepted Perkins Lane.
Okay, so
So there's a difference.
what's the variance for?
The variance is,
For the 11 feet?
Mr. Whiteside suggested that, no, I'm going to have 150 feet of frontage and not using any of the Hagerty's property. It's all on the Adams property. The Adams own the right-of-way.
Yep.
And I went to the abutter here, Mr. Cloud. He agreed to swap a triangle, so I have 11 feet. So that gives me 150 feet of frontage that the Adams, they'll let me record a deed stating that they've granted frontage there.
I get that.
Where's the access there? It's not the exact, the similar of the last hearing would have been if I'm coming in here and at the top of Perkins Lane, I'm saying I have 50 feet of frontage on Brush Hill Road and I want it approved. I'm not doing that.
No, I know.
Perkins Lane was approved.
Let me just, this is the record that we have in front of us.
Sure.
We've got a letter from the building inspector that says that Perkins Lane is not an accepted public way and no determination has been provided by the planning board to make it a public way for the purpose of the bylaw. I therefore thought that you were here to use Perkins Lane for the frontage. If Perkins Lane is indeed a public way for the purpose of the bylaw, then you don't need a variance.
Then where's the frontage for 610?
I don't know I don't know anything about 610. I wouldn't sit on that hearing, I don't know anything about it.
Only way it could have been built if I
No, I know,
came
but
here
the
and asked
hearing's
for-
not about 610, it's about lot 2.
No,
So,
but it's pretty important that Perkins Lane was accepted for the
get it.
purposes of 610.
but you get a letter from the building inspector that doesn't say
I know,
that.
But it was prior to Mr.
And that's
Prondak
part of the
being here.
record in this case.
It's prior to Mr. Prondak.
But do you have evidence in one of your files or from the planning board records?
I filed a subdivision plan, yep.
We need to see that. Because to me, that's the only reason you're here.
That's right.
I mean, I have a lot of questions about how this is actually going to work to get out on State Highway and things like that are reminding me of the time we spent on Randolph Avenue. Although the purpose of this, the upper part of Perkins, is an accepted public way, then I don't know why you're here. So I think we need more evidence, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem submitting the information of the application.
We'll talk to
before the
Joe.
planning board. It was just prior to Joe when that was approved, so Joe wasn't here, because he
Right, but I think Mr. Mullen is suggesting if you take that plan and what other planning board documents you have, and you show them to Mr. Prondak, then Mr. Prondak may form the conclusion that this application is not necessary.
Yeah.
That's what he's
I think
saying.
that's right.
Well, I still have to renew the original 32,000 square foot lots, right? That still has to be addressed because it expired.
Yes, I think that's right, but that's just, it's almost a formality because
But
it's,
it,
That would be a
No,
better fact pattern.
I wasn't even thinking about that issue. I thought it was a given fact that it was an accepted way because that's the only way 610 was built. That's how I got a building permit. Perkins Lane was improved and it was accepted frontage. I didn't use Brush Hill Road frontage. 'cause
so,
I-
but if Mr. Prondak disagrees with the planning board, their procedures or processes, or disagrees with how you interpret the planning board records, then you still have this application for variance present, and we can deal with that if we have to.
I agree.
So,
And I think for that purpose, and I understand, I'm hearing that Director Whiteside, not Director Whiteside, planning board member, is he the chair now?
Chairman, I don't
Chairman
think-
Whiteside?
no, I think Emily Ennis is.
Okay, Emily is?
Yes.
The chair.
I understand that Mr. Whiteside, I think appropriately has said, you know, want to get some sense from the Board of Appeals, but what I'm saying is, I'm not sure it's a frontage problem if the Perkins Lane issue goes away. The only other, I mean, there's a lot of questions about how the lots are going to work.
Okay, let me
When I
explain.
say go away, I don't mean go away, I mean be addressed through the,
Sure.
through the procedure to which you referred regarding Brush Hill Road.
Right. Let me just say two quick things. One is, I actually came before this board originally,
Several
when I had
times.
614 under agreement, before I did Perkins Lane, before we improved it. And I came in here, and I was trying to do pretty much what the applicant, the previous applicant was doing. I wanted to claim.
No way.
I had about 60 feet of frontage, maybe, no, I didn't have 60, I probably had 30 feet of frontage on Brush Hill, and the chairman said, that's not going to work. So I withdrew, went to the planning board. Part of it was, they wanted to preserve the upper house, and I agreed to do that, and they agreed to let me improve Perkins Lane and claim frontage for 610, and it was a full subdivision application was filed, so that,
So that's where your confidence in Perkins Lane comes from.
Yeah, two things, it's pre-zoning and the fact that, yeah, so, but this lot didn't have rights to that lane. That, I looked, we did a pretty thorough search of the history of it, and it wasn't till the Adamses willing to put it on paper that they accept, that me, claim frontage on that. And then I only had 139 feet, and then I went to the other neighbor, I was able to get, because I just wanted to keep it all on one side, I didn't want to bring some of the Haggerty's property into the frontage issue. So we were able to create it with the combination of that, the 150 feet of frontage, because that's part of the special permit process too, is you're supposed to have 150 feet of frontage. So I wanted to be able to deliver 150 feet in both locations, so. But, yeah, I know there's been some confusion regarding Perkins Lane and how that frontage was created, but it was an accepted way, Perkins Lane.
Well, I think, I don't think we were confused until the
saying that.
testimony.
Right.
And I think that unless it's being alleged that the access, that Perkins Lane it's a public way for the purpose of the bylaw, then I don't think you have a problem, but we have a problem with the record. So I think you do need to speak to the building inspector.
Sure.
I would feel more comfortable if to have the building inspector have another look at it.
Okay.
That's all I'm suggesting. I'm sorry to be taking up all the
that's
time on the board. This is the second one, but.
Let me ask this, excuse me, Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Mr. Sullivan?
No, I just need to have some of this confirmed I'm not clear on where we're going with it, so I would like to know a little bit more about what.
I think maybe unlike the last hearing, where there may be more substantial issues involved, and getting where they want to go may be much more difficult. Here, I have a sense from refreshing my recollection from the earlier variance that the development of these two lots in a sensible residential fashion is something that the town would cherish, and particularly the neighbors. And as a result, leaving these present structures that have been there far too long, and this is a wonderful opportunity to get that done. And this has the semblance of something that makes sense. But I agree with Mr. Mullen. If you can get your paperwork on the planning board taken care of, see Mr. Prondak. My suggestion is that you have further discussions with the Haggertys.
Sure.
And if you can reach certain agreements with them, that those agreements be reduced to writing, so we can put them in the decision, so that Mr. and Mrs. Haggerty will feel confident that they have some binding agreements that are going to be subject to some type of enforcement by the Board of Appeals. Then my guess is that if it's possible, would like to invite you all back here on June 21st, which is the date we already have scheduled.
January.
January.
You come in June if you want.
Yeah, well, I wish it would show them this.
Yeah.
This is getting.
It's for snow.
But, if you could come back on January 21st, we could deal with these issues and perhaps put this to bed. I know you've been waiting a long time to have this application processed. Does that give you enough time? This is the 12th, gives you a couple of
Yes.
weeks? And are you Mr. Haggerty? I assume you are.
I'm not. My name is Michael Brown, and I actually own.
Oh, okay, good, Mrs. Haggerty. Then that may be one way to do it. So let's do this. We've heard from you. Yeah, do you want to be heard, Mrs. Haggerty, for a brief? Why don't you come on up here and just use this microphone? You can stay right there, Mr. Sullivan.
And I will be brief.
And we'll make sure that we have all of the issues and people's views, at least preliminary, on the record.
Great. You read the memo? I'm Debbie Haggerty.
Hi, Debbie, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
And welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. I live at
We
600
did read your
Brush Hill
memo,
Road.
and it's part of the record in the case.
Terrific. Thank you. And having read it, I don't have a lot to say except that, just to be on record, we are the abutters with the largest exposure to the redevelopment, and we are in principle supportive because, to your point, to take that rundown nursery structure down and replace it with nice houses is a good thing for the neighborhood. But we value our privacy, so I think on the list that is in the memo and the things that I've heard discussed tonight with Mr. Sullivan, that you will have an arborist is great to come and just look at, because the tree, it's nice old trees that line the division between the properties. There's not good screening, because many of those trees, in the wintertime especially, it's just the trunks, they're not evergreen, so I would argue that
On my side,
yeah, and if we could
Small look.
have, a look to see if there is room for the arborvitae, they might just be prettier. So,
Yeah, maybe a
if we can
combination.
just look and see what's possible between the two, that would be great. But yeah, whatever ends up being the best solution. Utilities, there was some discussion around what we would want to have buried. I think it's just our, electrical lines that are hanging now and in storms, get tagged. So to put those underground, if it lines, our side of the lot. I understand that might not work out. The drain, discussion around the drain, that has been an ongoing issue for us. We have lived at this property for 20 years, so we've lived there well before 610 went in and the reconstruction of that lot occurred, and I can tell you that it did change. The movement of the land to build that house at 610 changed how the water runs down, and it adversely affected our property, and we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on water remediation, repaving not repaving, but regrading the driveway, doing other things. So we are very sensitive about making sure that that drain does work. So I do think it needs to be addressed.
Yep.
The pavement that you've done at the top of the road, hopefully that will help. But I think, as you said during this hearing, a lot of the water is just coming off of 614. Exactly, and it's not coming from Brush Hill. So that's that,
I can imagine,
and,
I'll look at that.
okay, terrific. I think that's it.
Okay, so do you have time between now and the 21st to sit down with Mr. Sullivan
Yeah.
and get these things worked out?
Yep,
Okay, that'd be terrific.
great,
Do you have anything else you want to add?
thank you.
Okay,
No.
great. Thank you.
Thank you,
for
everyone.
coming. Yes, sir. Of course,
Sorry.
please.
My name is Michael Brown, and I own 26 Vose Hill Road, which is unique in this conversation in that it actually does not abut Perkins Lane. I'm on the other side of the property. And I've only owned the property for 3 or 4 months. And I don't really have an opposition to what's being considered along the right-of-way. That's fine with me. My concern is more that I actually don't mind the view. The overgrown area at that part of the property of Lot 2 is actually quite nice to look at from my point of view. Regardless, I think that what Mr. Sullivan is proposing in terms of 2 residential lots is fine. It's probably the best use for that property. And so my opposition or concern about this application is limited. I'm mostly concerned with 2 or 3 things. Number one, my property or the development would visually impact, would cause a visual change from my property. And I'd like to have the opportunity to talk to Mr. Sullivan about ways we might be able to work around that, arborvitae or whatever. I'm sure you might know better than I would. The second is any plans to run utilities along the back of these properties. I would probably want to know more about. And that specifically includes the sewer that Mr. Sullivan mentioned that seems to be right at the intersection of our 2 properties.
Yeah, I don't know if that, I just know the neighbor had mentioned that the town came up looking for that manhole there, I guess it's between our property and Sylvia Brown next door.
Yeah.
There's a sewer easement that runs out to Vose Hill Road, and haven't gone up and seen the manhole, I'm not sure what it is, but.
Plan's got it on the next door property.
Huh?
The plan has it on 608.
Yeah, so they were looking for it, I don't know where they found it or not. So, right now, we're looking at probably doing gravity, whether we do gravity right along here, with the other there's a driveway, pretty much a gravel driveway right off the edge of this property right over
Are
here.
you talking about an underground sewer pipe, or?
Yeah, just the sewer pipe, yeah. The electrical isn't that deep, so we just bring it out the driveway. And then the water can be brought in the same place, or it could be brought over here, either way. But, you know, the problem with us even using up there is it's uphill, so we'd have to have a pump, which I try to avoid.
What was the third issue, Mr. Brown? You said you had three issues.
The last one is Mr. Sullivan's comment before that he would build a bigger house on Lot 2. There are going to be four issues. I have one after this. Why, Lot 2, even though the square footage seems to be a little bit more, it seems like the bigger of the smaller of the two lots. Why build the bigger house there?
Well, it's not gonna be significant bigger, you know, we're talking about building, you know, like, this would be 2,800, 3,000, you know, I mean, a buyer might come in and say they wanna build 2,500 square feet, I don't know right now where it stands, but I'm just estimating, you know, that'd be 3,200 square feet or so. And this one would be 28 to 3,000 square feet in that range.
I'm just curious from a developer's perspective, why would you choose to build a bigger house on a smaller lot?
It's just set back from the road a little further, so that's probably the only reason.
Do you know which part of Lot 2 you plan to build the house on? Would it be in the middle, towards Perkins Way, towards the back?
It'd probably be right here at a slight angle towards the driveway. So the back would be somewhat up towards the, you know, this area right here.
Okay.
So
Would it, I
the
mean,
driveway would, you know, obviously come out, probably the garage maybe be on this side and come down here. I mean, I haven't really picked a house or really spent that much time on it, but just looking at it quickly, you know, the driveway would come here, and then this driveway would come down, and they'd both go out the same location.
okay.
At the end.
I mean, the only other thing that I would request is if you could come up with a site plan or something like that, I'd be interested in seeing it.
Sure. Yeah, we could, you know, lay out some houses and see how they look, and, sure.
Sure, you're talking about a conceptual plan. I
Conceptual
assume.
plans, sure.
Right, yeah,
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine, I don't.
that makes
have a problem with
sense.
that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Brown, are you available on the 21st of January?
Yes, that's next week?
I hope not.
2
Is it?
weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah, it's 2 weeks away. Today's the 12th. So it'll probably be, we'll put it on for 7:45, but as soon as we finish Mr. Sheffield's matter, we'll go
Sure,
right
that's
into
fine,
this.
yep.
That's great, and if everybody has their paperwork and agreements all in order, we can hopefully act on this application at that time, okay?
Great.
So let me just ask for the sake of the record, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this particular application? And there's no such person present. We'll adjourn to the 21st of January at 7:45, same place. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Hi,
Hi, sorry it took so long.
it's okay.
Give me 2 seconds here just to get my paperwork in order. Are you all set?
I am.
Okay, so we're going to call to order our third hearing of the evening, and this is on the application of Laura Souter. Did I pronounce your name correctly? And Laura's application is dated December 7th, 2015, and is seeking a variance in order to legalize a new 4-foot by 12-foot by 1-story shed building, which is adjacent to, but is not attached to, an existing detached garage at the rear of her property at 358 Elliott Street in Milton. This property is in a Residence C zoning district, and the shed is 1.5 feet from the right side lot line rather than the 10 feet required under Section 6C2 of the bylaw. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening is, to my immediate right, is Board Member Virginia Donahue King, and to my immediate left is Board Member Jeffrey Mullen. The rules of the board are going to be the same as the other hearing. We'll hear from the applicant, people who have questions, and people who wish to speak in either support or opposition to this variance application. We're tape recording the proceedings as always, so that would ask that anyone, before they speak, tell us your name and address and speak up nice and clear and loud so we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding. I've summarized the advertisement. As evidence for this hearing, we'll have the application, which is dated December 7th, 2015. We have a denial letter from Mr. Prondak, our building commissioner. It's dated 10/28/2015. We have a plot plan of land prepared by Donald G. Rosa. It's dated 9/25/2015. It's entitled As-Built Plan, Shed Location, 358 Elliott Street, Milton. And in the interim, we've received 2 pieces of correspondence from interested parties. The first is from Mr. Kurt, it looks like Doiron, of 12 Waldo Road in Milton. And his letter is dated September 10, 2015. It's addressed to Ms. Sauter. It says, this letter is to inform you that I approve of your new shed that you've recently built next to your garage. It does not affect me in any way, and I believe it meets the required distance from my property line. Then we have a letter from Leslie Sands of 6 Waldo Road, Milton. It's dated September 10, 2015, and she writes that's her understanding that your shed does not comply with the 10-foot setback. You're seeking a variance, that the shed does not cross over onto her property or extend onto anyone else's property. She wants to be sure that that's the case, and if that is the case, Abe, whom I assume is her husband,
Yep.
And I support your application for a variance. So we thank both Ms. Sands and Mr. Doiron for their time and effort in submitting letters. So welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
I'm sorry we kept you so long.
Okay, I'm awake.
It would have been lucky if you were earlier rather than later, but we're delighted to hear from you regarding your application.
Thank you so much. I'm Laura Sauter. I live at 358 Elliott Street, and your summary is perfectly told. I did bring along a couple of photos of the shed and my neighbor's garage, as well as the letters, which you already have, it looks like. So what's the process now? This is my first time here.
Okay, well, the process is, let us look at the photographs and tell us
So.
when you constructed the shed,
I
approximately.
Okay, so I constructed it, I had a permit for the garage renovation already underway, and I had had a verbal discussion with Jay Bellia,
Yes.
in January of last year in preparation for the construction of the garage. And my verbal conversation was, again, I was trying to learn what, I knew that there were setback requirements, but he explained to me that if the shed did not touch the garage, that it was okay. And as long as it was movable and not permanently, constructed next to the building, that I'd be fine. So, long story short, the garage permit went in, and again, in preparation for taking the stuff out of the garage, I had the contractor build the shed, thinking I didn't need a permit. Jay came by, Mr. Boulia came by for the first look-see, and he informed me that I was non-compliant. So we went through that process of requesting a variance and so forth at that time. So the shed was built before any work was started on the garage. And it was, again, not touch, I mean, it's close, but there's about an inch between the two structures, and they're not attached. So I thought I was compliant, not knowing that I'm not, based on my verbal conversation. So prior to any type of renovation of the garage or construction of the shed, I did check in with my neighbors. Both my neighbors were fine with it, as evidenced by the letters. And so I felt very comfortable investing the time and money on the shed project, thinking I was in good shape. Again, this is my first permit process with you folks.
So the same contractor who built your garage, and this is permit right
Yep.
there in the window,
Yep.
Built the shed for you.
Correct.
And the shed looks like it's, is it sitting on some concrete bricks?
There's already
or-
kind of a lifted surface. It's an alley, like a 10-foot alleyway
Yep.
between our garages, which hadn't been used in the time I've lived there, which is 8 years. So I thought I was being really nifty by making use of that space. And I made this shed, I thought, as kind of low profile as possible. I did have the land surveyed, and it is only, our property lines do bisect the space, so there's a 1.5 foot on my side of the property line and 1.5 on her side of the property line. So I was measuring 3 feet as mine, but the property line actually does go through that remaining 3
So the
foot
middle of it.
section. Yeah.
And the shed that you built, what do you use it for?
So my bikes, my lawnmower, pots, potting soil, I have 2 kids, so there's not a lot of room in there. I mean, even though it does hold 3 bikes, but it's pretty tiny.
So it's for storage purposes?
Yeah,
You don't have
absolutely.
any utilities in there? Do you have any electric lights or
No,
there's no kitchen facilities? and-
no, there's a few pool noodles and a couple of sleds and 3 bikes and a lawnmower.
Okay. And the shed is not affixed to the garage in any
Correct.
way? Is it affixed to the ground, or does it just sit on the ground?
No, it's just sitting.
Okay, so if you removed, what are the dimensions of the shed?
So
Just-
it's 4 by 12.
Okay. And how high is the shed? It's probably,
It underhangs the garage by just a bit, so we tried to maximize the height just to have some headroom.
okay.
I didn't actually measure the
What
inside.
do you guess? Is it
Um,
10 feet? 8
I don't
to
think
10
it's that,
feet?
it's more like 8.
8 feet,
I
okay.
mean, I can stand up in there comfortably. There's a 6-foot shelf on one end, so I think 8 feet is a good guess.
Okay.
So on the other side of my garage, I have landscaping and pear tree and irrigation, and I have a pretty small yard. So, again, I was trying to maximize my unused 10-foot section by putting this slim shed in there. And if I put the shed on the other side of the garage, because really there's nowhere else to put it on the property without coming into the same setback issues, basically that would take up my yard.
How large is your lot? It doesn't really show on the plot plan. Maybe
I don't really know how to factor it. It's 50 feet, so it's 100, basically 100 by 50.
Yep, okay.
I mean, it's a little bit angled, but I would say 100 by 50.
Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
I missed the part about the 3 feet that you were explaining.
Oh, so now there's a 3-foot kind of alleyway or entryway, because I have some trash barrels in the back. So I was thinking I had left 3 feet between our property lines.
I see.
But now that I have it surveyed, I understand that the property line bisects that 3-foot section. So I am 1.5 feet away from their property.
So this brick wall that you show,
That's their garage.
okay,
But the property goes between those.
yes.
But for the purpose of, go ahead, John.
No, all I was going to say is that, so their brick wall of the garage is not built on the lot line, but it's
Correct.
1.5 feet from the property
Right.
line.
And my initial understanding was that their garage was at the property line. But now, now that I've had it professionally surveyed, I do understand differently.
Okay, so your suggestion then is that if their garage, do you know when this house was built?
So my house was 1930, and their house, I believe, was 1928.
So that house preceded zoning code?
Correct.
Their house? Okay, and your house is
1930.
Well, I think that's when we adopted zoning in Milton.
38.
Was it 38? Okay, so both of these are pre-existing non-conforming lots, and so you assumed that this other house was built on the property line, and it wasn't. So your position here is that despite the misunderstanding over whether this is a structure
Yep.
and whether it's movable or permanent, you understand that their house is 1.5 feet off the lot line, and you would like to have your garage 1.5 feet off the lot line as well.
Correct.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions, Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
You do?
For the purpose of confirming the comment made by Lindsay Sands, there is no portion of the shed on anyone else's property.
That's correct.
Yeah. The garage, that's not a new garage.
No, no.
That's just a renovated garage.
Just a renovated garage. So I'm making, it was never used for cars in my tenure at the home, and it was just a glorified shed already. So I am just cleaning it up, and I'm using it as an overflow space for some personal yoga
You park
practice.
vehicles in the garage?
I didn't, ever, and so now I definitely won't, because it won't be automobile friendly. We put French doors in the front.
I don't have any questions.
Mrs. King?
No, I don't.
Okay. Let's see if there's, we hear these ominous sounds outside. It sounds to me like it's a snowplow.
Yeah.
My hope was that it would have stopped snowing by
It
now.
was pretty furious when I came in.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we're all here for the night, but let's see if we can conclude your hearing. Let me ask if there's anyone present who wishes to ask Ms. Souter any questions, and there is no such person. Is there any person present who would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this application for variance? And there's no such person present, so we'll close the evidence portion of the hearing. We're not going to continue your hearing to
The 21st.
June 21st.
Or January 21st.
I keep saying June, I don't know why. It's
You're
must be-
wishing the winter
I'm
away.
wishing winter away, that's what it is. The snowplow did it to me. But let's see if we can have our usual learned discussion of this application. Mr. Mullen, would you like to
Support
be
the
heard?
application. I think it's perfectly reasonable, supported by the neighbors. De minimis in terms of its impact on the neighborhood, and is an improvement to the property, and I support it.
And you're of the opinion, as a matter of law, that this is a structure as opposed to a movable object,
think it
even though it's not affixed to the ground or
think it probably
has no foundation? It's,
Well, you got a building permit for it, right?
Do I have a building permit for the shed?
no.
It was built without a building permit. I have a building permit for the garage.
Right.
So, long story short,
So that's why you need your variance. Okay, I was just asking.
I think, I think we could argue it either way, John, given the fact that it it could be temporary and remove it without damaging
You
itself.
could move it every day of the week to a different location on the lot if you wanted
You
to.
know, I don't know that that's how it, that's not maybe in the spirit of which it's been built. It really is ancillary to the garage, right? It's
Correct.
performing a similar function.
Similar.
Yeah.
Sure, and that's the ideal location for this,
Yeah.
this shed, so it doesn't take up the rest of your backyard.
Correct.
Okay. Mrs. King?
It's there. It was, I feel bad that it was built, you thought you were doing the right thing and all. It does look movable to me, so I'm less concerned than I would be if it were a piece of the garage, and also I'm willing to vote for it.
Well, I certainly appreciate your application. You presented it very, very well, and you were very honorable and candid in discussing the manner in which it came to be. Sometimes these structures are somewhat tricky, but under these circumstances, I don't think it's really relevant whether it's permanent or can be moved. It's silly, since it's right next to a brick wall, it looks like it's 8 or 10 feet high, that anybody's being adversely affected. You've secured the consent of all of your neighbors. It is, in my view, foolish to require you to have it moved to the center of your backyard, which deprives you of the utility of your backyard. You have a small lot as it is. So I certainly understand the misunderstanding of what was required. Sometimes we have applications where the understanding of people who build things illegally is not as candid as you've been here tonight. So I certainly, I think this is the garage is perfectly placed, but for the lot line, nobody's adversely affected. And I intend to support this application. So all those in favor of allowing this application for variance?
Yes.
Aye.
Well, congratulations, you now have a lawful
Thank you.
shed.
I'm very happy. Thank you.
I think it's a structure, I just don't know whether it's a permanent or movable structure, and I don't know whether that makes any difference. But congratulations. I should tell you that we will have to prepare a written decision.
Okay.
We can probably turn that around very quickly.
Does that get mailed to me?
Yes, Mrs. Fitzgerald will mail it to you. It has to be signed by the board members. It has to be filed with the town clerk.
Okay.
And even though nobody has opposed your application for variance, there's still a 20-day appeal period that has to pass before your application will be deemed a final variance, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
When the application is final, then talk with Mrs. Fitzgerald or Mr. Prondak, because you're going to have to record your variance with the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
And they'll tell you how to do that and what it costs and where to go and mail it or go in person, because you want to keep the title to your property up to date.
Okay.
And if you sell your property 15 years from now and somebody's asking about the shed, you want to be sure that it's on record that we've granted a variance.
Got it.
Okay?
Thank you.
So with all of that having been said, congratulations. And
Thank you
maybe
very
you'll
much.
sleep a little better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to have kept you.
Pardon me? Oh, thank you so much. The shed is, the garage is coming along nicely. That part's all done properly.
Oh, good for you.
It's nice over there on Waldo.
Yeah.
Near the park.
Yep.
So just for the sake of the record, we are adjourned.
Adjourned.